Hello world, I'm Pete McConville and welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. Before I go on, I have a confession to make. Although I promise to talk about watches which are not so obvious and which you won't hear about all the time, the truth is I have an addiction. I have an addiction to Seiko divers. I own more than I should and I'm not going to stop, I'm just going to keep buying them. However, it's a load off my mind to get that out there, and so I'm going to talk about one of them today. So today I'm going to do my first ever watch review of a Seiko diver, and it's going to be the Orange Samurai SRPB97, otherwise known as the Orange Samurai. Okay, so the Orange Samurai is, like all Seiko divers, fundamentally a dive watch, so that's what it's out to do. But the truth is, very few of us are in fact professional divers, and by and large we use these dive watches as our kind of casual holiday sports watches. Occasionally, in some cases, business watches, but with a big orange diver like this one, that's unlikely. So I'm going to do the review from the context of this is a watch that can be a dive watch, that has to meet all the requirements of a dive watch, but at the same time has to be wearable in that kind of holiday sports casual watch way. It's also the first rung up the ladder for many people in terms of you've had your very basic watch and now you're spending a little bit more money. And so I'm going to look at it from the point of view of it's often going to be either someone's very first watch or maybe their first jump up the ladder from that kind of very basic intro. So with that said, no further ado, let's spin the camera around, get in the light box and have a closer look. Okay, so we're inside the light box having a look at the Seiko Orange Samurai diver. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is look at how does the design satisfy the requirements of being a dive watch. We're really going to be guided here by the requirements of ISO 6425. Okay, first is one of the first requirements of the ISO standard relates to legibility. And I think it would be hard to see how you could make this watch more legible. Big flat crystal, big flat dial, matte orange against brilliant white with the black borders around both the indices and the hands. Everything is extremely easy to see. I think the second requirement is that the minute hand has to extend right out far enough that it's easy to see where it falls against the indices. And again, I think that would be pretty much a yes. It's hard to imagine how much further out that minute hand could go. The next requirement is that there has to be protection against inadvertent operation. And in here we've really got three features. One, the classic, the unidirectional bezel that can only go one way, such that were you to bump it, you always fail conservatively. I think the other thing to note is the screw down crown, which prevents accidentally pulling the crown out and resetting the time. And the other thing I would add to that would be these very carefully shaped guards, which do a good job of making sure that you don't bang or in any way accidentally affect the operation of the crown. As far as it's also got to be quite tough to be a diver. It can be a rough environment down there, so you want a fair bit of toughness. Again, this watch is ISO 6425 certified. That means it's going to have a degree of anti-shock protection, a degree of anti-magnetism protection, and it's going to be certified to be able to withstand at least, I think it's 25% more than 100 meters. This goes to 200 meters, which means it's actually certified to 250 meters. So all in all, I think that meets all the requirements of legibility, protection of operation and toughness required of a dive watch. Let's look at its everyday functions. First off, from a wearability point of view. It's a big watch. It's a 44 millimeter dial circumference. It's 48 millimeters lug to lug, and it's 13.5 millimeters thick. So it's a decent sized watch. And on top of that, it's mounted on this kind of sort of squared off cushion case, which gives it the shoulders on the side, which, if you look up, extend down the lugs even further, which gives it quite a bit of wrist presence. It really does stand out and becomes quite an imposing watch. But at the same time, it's surprisingly wearable. It's not overly thick for a diver. At 13.5 millimeters, that makes it just 0.5 millimeter thicker than, say, the 40 millimeter Rolex Submariner. So all in all, that's relatively thin for a diver. On top of that, you've got these aggressively angled lugs, which are themselves quite short and mounted very low on the case, which all acts to make it a watch that sits quite comfortably and quite low on the wrist. So even though it is a 40 millimeter diameter, it doesn't wear that way. It probably wears more like a 42, potentially even a 40 millimeter case. The other thing you'll want from an everyday kind of casual sports watch is a little bit of flair, a little bit of something that makes it pop. Okay, now if you want something that makes it pop, I think right from the beginning, really the orange tells you that you're here for a bit of a party and it's a bit of a casual watch. It's got a nice case back. Normally I would like a display case back here, but given the kind of dive aesthetic that Seiko's putting off here, I can live with the idea that it's got this nice wave engraving and all the other details that Seiko insists on giving us. One thing I would note is that Seiko has used its proprietary Hardlex crystal in this case. Now, as you can see from these shots, that gives you pretty much excellent visibility. There's no real issues from a visibility point of view. From a strict diver, it's actually probably preferable. Hardlex is a little bit less likely to shatter than sapphire, but from an everyday wearer point of view, it's also far more likely to scratch. So from a strict diver's perspective, I can see why Seiko, and I can defend Seiko's choice to go with the Hardlex. But from someone who's going to wear this every day in a more sort of casual sports environment, I probably would have taken the greater scratch resistance that sapphire would give me. The other issue is the aluminium bezel. Again, one, at this price point, I can kind of understand why it's an aluminium bezel, and two, it does kind of integrate nicely with the overall design. That being said, given that the reality of this watch is that it will probably do far less diving than it will ever do party or weekend resort wear, I think blinging it up with some ceramic, similar to, for example, the Nemo, the one-off Japanese market-only version of the Turtle, would have actually been probably a better choice. So how have the engineers executed the desires of the designers? Let's have a look. The first choice is, what movement are we going to use? The engineers have chosen the ubiquitous 4R35, the darling of the micro brand set, and it's a very good choice for this. It's definitely better than the 7S that Seiko puts in its Seiko 5 line. 21,600 beats per minute, or beats per hour, sorry. 41-hour power reserve, hackable, hand windable, solid, accurate, serviceable, and so cheap it's probably just replaceable in the event that you really didn't, you really broke the watch. Not that I think you ever will. Okay, let's now talk about the band. As you can see, this is not the band it came with, so I'll put that to one side. Okay, so the watch comes with a Seiko band. It's quite popular on the net to kind of slag off at the Seiko bracelets, but frankly, I don't mind them, particularly at this price point. Very secure trigger release system, only stamped, but then at the other hand, it's a $500 watch, not a $500 bracelet, so I can probably live with that. A degree of micro adjustment. Nicely polished, nicely brushed with polished end links. Fully solid end links, sorry. All in all, look, I don't use it because I love NATOs, but there's really nothing wrong with this, certainly at this price point. And if you're buying a $500 watch, this is a perfectly serviceable bracelet that will do you fine. Coming back to the watch itself, And talking about the attachments, drilled lugs, yay! I love this. This is something I believe pretty much every watch should ever have, and I'm absolutely ecstatic to see that Seiko's given them to us here. Okay, so now let's go on to how the watch has actually been built and put together. Kind of neat and aligned. Everything seems to be straight. There may be some very slight misalignment of some of the indices in the chapter ring. I'd have to really measure that closely, but yeah, maybe it's not quite centered, but frankly, until I actually started trying to do this video and looking at it that closely, I'd never noticed. But it is when you start to get up close, like we just did, and looking very carefully, you begin to see where the money has been saved here. There are some creases and some ridges where in a more closely specified watch, you wouldn't see them. Probably the biggest one is here on the gap between the crystal and the bezel. In a better watch, in a higher grade watch, that would be designed to be flush. This isn't a build quality issue. It's simply they haven't even tried to make that flush there. That sounds like a pissy little issue, but it's actually quite important. Even in my short time of owning this, I have found that things get caught in that space, and it is something you need to pay attention to, of clearing that out, which in most of my other watches is not really an issue. Likewise, the date integration is a bit kind of meh, bit of an afterthought. No color coding of the date wheel and the dial. I hate it when they jam dates in and have to cut off indices and so forth, which clearly they've had to do here. So really something, again, this has clearly been designed and built to a price, and things like the date window integration are where you pay the price for that. I think the bezel itself is okay, but again, in the operation of the bezel, it's, like I said, it's okay, but it's kind of soft, like the detents aren't particularly well formed. It's a bit dull when you move it from one space to another, and there is a fraction of back play or play in the watch between detents. Again, probably okay at this price point, but it does indicate where it is in this price point. The crown screw is okay. It's not sticky, which is a cardinal sin, but it is kind of dry, like it hasn't been lubricated enough, or it's just not quite built to the tolerances you'd want. If you look up close, you'll see there are nice crisp lines, but at the end of the day, they're quite simple. There's no chamfering of these creases here. There is some mixing and matching of finishing, but as I said before, all these sorts of connections in here between the mid case and the mid case and these sort of integrated lugs or extended lugs is kind of a bit soft. It's not got that crispness that you might expect in a better watch, frankly. Finally, the bezel is kind of okay, but again, this hobnail finish is actually probably a bit smooth. A little bit more money, a little bit more care, a little bit more time to make it grippier would have been excellent. So really, that's about it for my watch, for the review here in the Lightbox. What we'll do now is go back to camera and do a bit of a wrap up, and yeah, see you in a second. Okay, so that's our close-up look at the Orange Seiko Samurai. So let's now look at it more broadly about where does this watch fit in the market, and is it the watch for you? I think the first thing to note is it's got an MSRP of around about $520 US. You almost never have to pay that. This watch routinely trades at around about $420. I actually got mine at $350 at US at an end-of-year sale at Macy's when I was on a work trip to Hawaii. As far as alternatives go, there are literally hundreds. This is probably the single most contested space in the watch area. You know, this sort of $400 to $600 entry-level dive watch is the home to literally dozens, if not hundreds, of different watches, especially in the micro-brand space. But if you look at the most obvious alternatives, actually they're probably other Seikos. The Seiko Turtle is almost a 1-for-1. I think it's got a day as well as a date, and it's got the cushion case as opposed to this sort of squared off angular case of the Samurai. But it's, as far as price and specification goes, it's essentially the same watch recased. If you want to go further down, the SKX isn't that much cheaper. And if you go up a little bit more, the Monster and even perhaps the Sumo, if you can find it in the right place, isn't that much more. So Seiko itself competes quite heavily with its own watch. Likewise, the Seiko stablemate Orient has the Triton, which sits almost exactly over the top of this watch, maybe a little bit above. And it's got the Mako and the Ray that sit just a little bit below it. So there's a lot of competition there. And they're probably the most obvious competitors. Two less obvious watches would be, the first one is the Citizen ProMaster Scuba. 44 millimeters, so it's I think it's 46 actually. On the other hand, it's in titanium and it uses a lot of the same tricks as the Seiko, very short lug distances, highly aggressive angles. So from a fit point of view, it is larger, but it might make it in. Not a watch you will ever see on anyone's wrist. I don't think I've ever seen one in the wild. And so it's certainly in that same style, in that same specification. And if you like something like the Samurai but don't want to wear the same as everyone else, yeah, seriously look at the Citizen ProMaster Scuba. If you want to go Swiss, I can really only find one option, and that'll be the Satina DS. You can pick those up for around about $500 on Joma Shop. And so yeah, that puts you, it is a little bit more expensive, but it certainly gives you that Swiss brand. It'll have all the capabilities of the Seiko, gets you started on the Swiss area. And so yeah, if you're interested in something in this price range and you want to try Swiss, the Satina DS is for you. Now there are a million, okay, exaggeration, probably several dozen micro-brand options. Micro-brands aren't really my space. What I'd really suggest is that you perhaps have a look over at Jody's Jody's website on Just One More Watch. This is his bread and butter. He covers this area a lot. What I would say is that there are a lot of options for you in the micro-brand space. So what's the takeaway on this watch? For me, as a bigger guy, I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is a great watch. It fits me very nicely. I like the colors and the smart casual thing. I think it plays off those two roles of being a diver and my kind of holiday watch really well. That said, I'm kind of ambivalent about recommending it to other people. It is a good watch. I'm a Seiko collector, so it's a good watch that fits in with my collection, hence I'm very, very happy with it. But if you're not a Seiko collector, if you don't need perhaps the certainty of being attached with a big brand and you're happy to go with a micro brand, it sounds strange because it's my watch and I bought it and I love it, but I'm not necessarily recommending it to you. I would recommend that you think hard about what you want, do some more research, and determine that there isn't something that perhaps offers better value for money out there in the micro brand world before committing to this. That's not just, as I said, it's not a criticism of the watch, but it is I think it is fair to say that there are other brands trying harder to make you happy at this end of the market. That's it. I'm a Seiko collector. I'm a Seiko guy. This is my watch. I'm happy with it. So really take that for what it's worth, and think about what that means as you collect your watches. And that's really the ultimate point here. I've tried to say accurately and honestly what the watch is, where I see it, but ultimately it's over to you to figure out where this fits in your collection. So with no further ado, I hope this helped. If it did, like and subscribe. If it didn't, like and subscribe, and I'll try and get better next time. Thanks very much, and I'll keep making more content, and hopefully more people will keep watching it. See you later.